Okay. Now, today, the beginning of the 4th week of the course, you'll notice that the topic for today is the now undisputed facts concerning the assassination. Now, this is assuming, of course, that there is such a thing as undisputed facts. And so what I want to do is I want to deal a little bit before we get started on that. I wanted to note that we sent to you guys an email that had an additional chronology, which is kind of the opus chronology, analogous to our opus syllabus, the big 147-page syllabus that we've dug up a 1,000-page chronology, which we forwarded to you. It's a whatever you call that, where you can shade it out and put it into your computer and then pop it, and it'll give it to you, whatever all that is. But anyway, so you can find it. It's not a link where it'll just pop right up in front of you, but you can copy down the HTTP site for it and put it into your computer, and you can find it. Okay? And so that's a 1,000-page chronology. And what I wanted to do is I pointed out I wanted to direct your attention more specifically. I wanted you to have that so that you'll have that for the duration. You'll have that entire 1,000-page chronology that has all kinds of information, and they're pretty good, we discovered, in relating that on such and such a day it is reported at this particular time that this particular person did X or Y. And then they give you the site of who said that. So what it is it's a chronology of information relating to what people said was going on at that particular point in time. So it's 1,000 pages, and I wanted to direct your attention to sort of the middle section of it, the middle third of it, that basically runs from approximately page 333 to 666 in the middle, because that part contains what is getting closer and closer to not just the sort of background to and aftermath of the assassination, but it's focusing upon the events that are kind of all surrounding the assassination itself. That page 333 to 666.
This middle part is under the name Extended Chronology.
Okay.
On e-commons.
Okay, so you've got it on e-commons, and it's under Extended Chronology, that section. And within that 300 pages, I want to direct your attention very specifically to 100 pages that go from page 387 to page 489, basically. So it's basically 100 pages. And this is dealing in much more specific detail with particular events. You'll see in reading it that it starts to sound a bit like almost like a screenplay of events unfolding in front of you. One of these, almost like Syriana, or one of these other real verite, those cinema verite kind of presentations of historical events. And so I want you to take a look at it. That probably a lot of you haven't gotten to take a look at that yet. But what I've proposed is sort of work your way out from those 100 pages. Take a look at that page 387 to 489, kind of go through it, because it's only 100 pages, and you can kind of just, I'm not asking you to take notes on it or to memorize it or anything like that. I want you just to go through it, kind of glide through it, reading it kind of at just a regular pace, and try to sort of get a picture, kind of a sense of what it's saying to you in there. Because that is making a presentation that is pretty even-handed. They bring in certain pieces of information which you may kind of raise your eyebrows about and say, what the hell is that in here for? What does that mean? When does that become relevant in any account? But you don't have to worry about that right now. Just kind of go on through it through those 100 pages. And if those 100 pages adequately whet your appetite, you can expand out to the other 100 pages on each side of that, to the 300-page account. And that you'll get kind of a deeper background of what all the information is. And then you can, if you want to, take a look at the whole 1,000 pages, because the other 666 pages, the 330 that follow it and the 333 that precede it, give a much deeper background and a much more current kind of analysis. So it's a good comprehensive chronology for you to have available here. And so that, with that having been said, I want to, without reviewing page by page, the 100 pages of more or less undisputed facts concerning the assassination, I want to, this is all in preparation for our beginning in week 5, to actually start looking at the particular affirmative, alternative theories of the crime. And the reason that we focused on the lone gunman theory for this amount of time, and have been discussing various issues in the context of the lone gunman theory, is because of the fact, as I pointed out, that this still is cited over and over and over again by virtually all news media and all kind of government-sanctioned forums as the official government account of what it is that happened to the president. And so it's in that context, as we start to prepare, beginning next week, to go into the details of the particular alternative theories of the assassination, I wanted to get up in front of us today the kind of set of more or less undisputed facts concerning the assassination. Now, I want to point out at the outset that this undertaking here today actually is predicated upon an assumption that a return to the inductive model of analysis is the most trustworthy. The inductive mode of analysis having been set forth by Nikki Orgy in one of the 2 articles that I had to read in the first week, The Study of Politics in the Approaches and Methods. This particular one, where he talks about the differences, the strengths and weaknesses of an inductive versus a deductive mode of analysis. This is this attempt to discern and identify a set of more or less undisputed facts relating to the assassination is rooted in an affirmation of the value of an inductive process, of starting and just looking at the minimum thing that you can all agree upon and build it up. Now that inductive process in turn suggests that the worldview that we talked about, that spectrum of worldviews that I set forth for you on the board, which I'm sure you've all committed to memory now, there's a middle marginals worldview that is referred to there. And it's rooted in a belief in the value of scientific logical positivism. And that is that it is much wiser and safer to proceed only upon a set of facts that you are completely scientifically convinced is true. Because otherwise, if you start using other criteria to accept as fact any types of assertions or proposals, that in fact you're off into a dangerous realm. Because if it hasn't been scientifically proven and sort of proven to be replicable, and that everybody can basically agree with this, then you're into the realm of hypothesis, or proposals, or possibilities, or theories. But with regard to the scientific logical positivist mode of ethical analysis, as long as you confine yourself to something that's already been scientifically proven to be true, that you can then trust it. And that way, while on the one hand, you are much less at risk of making mistakes, you will see that on the downside of that, you are confined forever to not understanding reality. Because all you really know is that portion of it that has been scientifically verified. And so that there are pluses and minuses. to utilizing this mode of ethical analysis, scientific logical positivism. And so what I want to do is I want to point out that this assumption that we can ascertain and come to agreement on a certain set of virtually undisputed facts is what we want to deal with here today. But again, prior to this, I want to again remind you, in the other reading that we did in the first week, Twining's article, William Twining's article, Evidence as a Multidisciplinary Task or Subject. You'll remember that he pointed out that he said as follows: narrative story, or that is this kind of full, detailed narrative about a theory of a crime, a comprehensive, self-referentially inclusive account of what it is that's happened. He said a narrative story provides a coherent structure of proof, an overall framework for considering a case as a whole. And for those who are seeking facts, they can thereby assess the relative strength or competing stories in terms of their comparative coherence, internal consistency, plausibility, and completeness, pointing out that there is wide agreement among scholars and practitioners in the field of evidence that narrative is a critical importance in fact determination. However, storytelling can be seductive, and while it is necessary, it is also dangerous. As we noted with regard to the account of the Warren Commission and the FBI and the Dallas Police Department. They set forth what was on the face of it a very persuasive narrative, all the way down to having neutron-activated tests done on little fragments found in the front seat of the limousine, and verifying that they were part of the bullets that were fired from Oswald's rifle, which had his handprints on it and his fingerprints on it. And so that it was a very persuasive narrative. But we saw that when in fact it was looked at more closely, that it had all kinds of opportunity for being deceptive. And so he therefore said, so he argues for when one is undertaking an analysis of any such narrative, comprehensive narrative, that one give full consideration to certain recent developments affecting the subject of evidence, which include an increased interest in the consideration of the relationship between narrative, holism, postmodernism, and pragmatism. Now, since this isn't a class in philosophy, as we pointed out in the first week, I want to discuss these things a little bit. I want to address this issue that has been raised by one of the scholars in the field of evidence. This need to give greater consideration to these recent developments with regard to the relationship between narrative and holism and postmodernism and pragmatism. So that's what I want to point out here today. That, as I said, we have seen a holistic, integrated account of the assassination of the president, given by the Warren Commission and the FBI and the Dallas Police Department. But we discovered that this capacity for deception that it has was rooted in a specific worldview. And that worldview was the dialectical worldview of anti-communism. And on our spectrum that we laid out here, it was the second from the extreme right. The extreme right, remember, was authoritarianism. And the reactionary worldview is one step closer to the center. But this reactionary worldview is predicated upon a dialectical assumption. And in this particular case, it was rooted in anti-communism. That the J. Edgar Hoover, who basically made his entire reputation hunting subversives from the time he was 24 years old, when he went into the Bureau of Investigation, the new Bureau of Investigation. He was appointed at the age of 24 to be the head of the intelligence division of the Bureau of Investigation. And he made his reputation by hunting for subversives. This was all during that period that you may have touched upon in your American history courses, the whole era of chasing subversives, anarchists, people that were believed to be, or portrayed as anarchists. And they had the Palmer raids, and that whole kind of initiation of the era of going after people who I said were characterized as anarchists. What they really were, however, is they were socialists. That because this came right after the 1917 revolution in October of 1917 in Russia, with the ascendance to power of the Bolsheviks. And the United States government moved on by and nudged on by major reactive forces in the United States, primarily in the American business community and financial community, launched a full-scale U.S. military expeditionary force into Russia to try to crush the Bolshevik Revolution in its infancy. And they combined with the White Russians from around St. Petersburg, etc., and attempted to crush the Bolshevik Revolution. Well, what happened is back in the United States, there was a concomitant domestic movement, which was to characterize anybody who was a socialist as being an anarchist, and that they were somehow a major threat of terrorism. That they were dangerous because they were going to assassinate American political leaders. They were going to set off bombs. They loved, Hoover loved this idea of bombs, of wild-eyed bombers that were going to basically blow up places at random and to cause chaos because they were inherently anarchists. They didn't want to go all the way to the point of asserting that they were socialists or communists, but they had hit upon a usable theme that they were anarchists. And this is where J. Edgar Hoover made his reputation. From the age of 24 to 30, through that whole period from 1922 to about 1928, he ran the intelligence division of the Bureau of Investigation. This was before it was known as the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And so at the age of 30, when the full head of the Bureau of Investigation was caught up in the Teapot Dome scandal, he ended up being appointed to be the new director of the Bureau of Investigation. And he imported into the FBI this same kind of dialectical, confrontational, reactionary worldview. Yes?
I'm not familiar with the teapot.
The Teapot Dome scandal?
Can you expand on that?
No, you can find it. It's just a little aside. It was a big famous political scandal, sort of like the Iran-Contra scandal, Watergate. It was the Watergate scandal of their day. It was a whole series of federal legislators, congressmen and senators that were being accused of being bribed by major businessmen over their private business interests. So the bottom line is that J. Edgar Hoover, when he ascended to head the new Bureau of Investigation, he imported with him this whole concept of it being fundamentally dialectical, confrontational, that there was a good set of good guys and bad guys. There were us and them. And so he continued to infect the Bureau of Investigation with that particular dialectical, confrontational worldview. And what we saw in the initial investigations of both the Dallas Police Department and the FBI, that their entire investigation was not only engined by that particular set of presumptions, but it in fact shaped their actual fact-finding process itself. And so that this worldview, this holistic worldview, infected the objectivity of their actual fact-finding. So that we saw them pushing away evidence, not even interviewing certain kind of people once they realized that they were going to say something they didn't want to hear, to the point of potentially going so far as actually fabricating evidence that would sustain its narrative. Okay? So what I want to do is I want to point out here briefly what some of the strengths are and weaknesses are of such a comprehensive narrative. Because when they throw around terms like postmodernism and holism, and even pragmatism, it might not be immediately apparent to you what all of those things mean. So I want to just briefly point out what they're saying to us here. What they're saying is that if in fact you have a narrative or a holism. Holism is that everything in your theory is all internally and self-referentially consistent. That's holism, okay? And that what it does is that the problem is that when you come upon a point where you don't know what the particular information is in a certain hole in your evidence, what there's a tendency to do is to fill it in so that it fits with the whole rest of your narrative. It's almost like having a particular algorithm going, and the question on the exam is here's a certain value, X, in the middle of your algorithm. How do you figure out what that is? And what you do is, if you're adept at the algorithm, you can figure out what X is in the middle of that. Now that is helpful from the point of view of an investigative tool to try to go looking for that, because rather than just being looking out in the world at random for things, you have some idea of what it is you're looking for. And so it gives you a better opportunity of finding it. But you don't want to make the mistake of putting it in there, filling it in there, when you haven't proven it yet. Okay? And that's part of what it does. But this positive full narrative not only provides a tool for guiding your investigation, but what it does is it provides stability, an ability to plan. It actually, more importantly, it provides meaning to what you're doing. Because that narrative, once you get an entire self-integrating narrative, that then you can look at it and you can determine what it means, how it fits into the rest of your world. And you'll see that that's one of the qualities and characteristics that has constantly plagued the issue of the Kennedy assassination. Is everybody wants to have the assassination comport with the meaning that they have given to the world. And that in the case of the FBI, it was here it's perfectly clear that we were in the middle of the Cold War, the Soviets are the bad guys, here's a guy that's been to the Soviet Union, here's a defector from our United States Marine Corps, he's the guy that killed the president. That all makes sense. It makes sense in accordance with my worldview. The problem is that if in fact they feel so strongly about maintaining that worldview and persuading others to adhere to that particular worldview, when confronted by such a serious event as this, there's a certain temptation to impose upon otherwise inchoate evidence a certain understanding that is consistent with that worldview. And that's what the accusations are with regard to the FBI and even the Warren Commission. That's what they fell prey to. They were so intent upon defending the meaning that they had given to the world by casting it in terms of this ongoing Cold War with these ultimate bad guy Bolsheviks and these ultimate good guy, hardworking, entrepreneurial, capitalist people that favored democracy and freedom and the American way of free enterprise. And that's the advantage and disadvantage of such a particular positive worldview. The problem with a full-scale narrative or the adherence to a worldview like that is that it threatens conformism. It threatens to insist that there is such a thing as an absolute right and everybody needs to comport themselves with it. And it generates judgmentalism to the degree to which anyone is conducting themselves in a way that is inconsistent with that particular worldview. And it ultimately threatens an authoritarian system. That reactionary worldview will constantly threaten to open onto its right to a totalitarian or authoritarian worldview, because they want everybody to comport with their assumptions. And the reason that the second issue that we're going to talk about here, this concept of postmodernism, is that it's a deconstructive activity. And what they're saying is that, look, that this temptation toward holism, this temptation toward developing a thorough, self-referentially, internally consistent worldview, not only has the threat of conformism in it, what it does is it actually has generated very bad systems. It's generated the entire concept of the white man's burden that has been used to engine imperialism on the part of the Caucasian nation states. It has generated a male, chauvinist, dominated culture that basically denigrates the value of women. It is racist because it also denigrates any of the other races other than the white race, and that those who are in charge of myth-making in the system, who are all white men, usually white male property owners, are actually generating a system whereby they kind of browbeat everybody into their view of nationalism, that the entire nation itself is supposed to be at the beck and call of that worldview and to attempt to effectuate it. So what has arisen in the face of that is this idea of a postmodern critique or deconstruction of all of the basic assumptions of those kind of worldviews. Because they pointed out that if you probe deeply enough into any of the findings of those worldviews, you'll discover that they fall apart. Not unlike what happened with regard to the Warren Commission report, when you actually got into investigating in detail what was really said by the witnesses as distinct from how it was portrayed. When you got into looking at what kind of questions were really being asked by the investigators for the Warren Commission. When you look at what, for example, with Dr. Gwynn in this famous activated radiation tests that were performed on the fragments of the bullets, you actually found that he said, well, wait a second, the ones they gave me to examine weren't even the ones that they performed the ballistic tests on. So that impression that you were being given is that these neutron activated tests that I did somehow confirmed the ballistics test isn't true. Okay? So the deconstructionists are dedicated to trying to deconstruct any type of affirmative thesis. Because the affirmative thesis carries with it the dangers of authoritarianism and conformity and coercion. And so what you see is that those who are the champions of a consistent worldview like anti-communism, or more pointedly, Caucasian nation-state-based imperialist capitalism, is what the actual full affirmative thesis is that they're operating on there. They're terrified about people who are deconstructionists. And that's why they call them anarchists. That they are here just trying to roll a grenade into our tent. They're trying to blow up our affirmative hypotheses all the time. And so that they're not constructive, they're not helping, they're undermining the kind of clarity, meaning, and authority that we can bring to the table for people if they will only listen to us. Okay? And so that the positive features of deconstructionism, or this postmodern point of view, oftentimes referred to as pragmatism, is that it promotes pluralism and tolerance, minimizes the temptation to bias. It increases the probability of being able to ultimately discover the truth because you aren't already convinced that you know the truth. And therefore that you're trying to just push away other things that are inconsistent with your view of the truth. Okay? Now, but the negative features of this deconstructionism and postmodernism is that it postpones certainty. And the challenge there is that sometimes it postpones certainty for so long that you miss the opportunity to achieve a certain available option. And I was telling you on the decision tree analysis, where you come to the fork in the road, and you've got another 50 miles to go, and you only have a half an hour to go, and you stand there and you kind of dance around at the intersection of the road, and you don't know which way to go. You're not falsely certain, but on the other hand, you're not going to make it. And so that happens sometimes with the use of deconstructing other people's positive theories and theses, that you sometimes miss opportunities for waiting over long to come to an adequate degree of resolution. And it also postpones decisions, as I point out, and it prevents you from benefit, very importantly, and this is kind of a metaphysical dimension of this thing, is it inherently prohibits you from having the benefit of understanding reality. Because one of the things that it constantly professes is that they're not making any grand statements about reality itself, because science hasn't proven every aspect of reality. And so therefore, they are willing to accept the costs of not knowing what reality is. And so that conviction that since truth has not yet been confirmed scientifically, that they're willing to forego whatever the advantages are of knowing what the truth is going to keep them from joining the group of people who can achieve the positive benefits of knowing what the truth is. Yes, Wes?
Well, if you're really convinced of postmodernism, wouldn't it not be a risk at all, because you're already convinced that the truth they're giving you isn't the real truth? So
Well, it's more than that. It's more than that. They actually become convinced that there is no such thing as truth. There's actually no such thing as truth. In that they'll go to great lengths to point that out to you and to try to make it clear. And so therefore that anyone who is trying to come up and make any kind of declaration with regard to truth, they will push them away and make fun of them and shun them. And again, it harkens back to that thing I mentioned in the first week. There's this group called the Collège de Pataphysique in Paris that every year has people submit to them propositions, affirmative propositions that they think are more or less self-evident, and clearly so, and they will then assign their team to work on destroying them and show that that's clearly not so. There's something wrong with one or more of the affirmative theories that support it, and it isn't true. And so and you've had this going on in Western civilization and in Eastern civilization for 6,000 years. This dialogue has been going on. That you have, for example, back in ancient Greece, where in Western civilization, where they basically bring you back to there, as if that's where everything started, ignoring the whole rest of the world. And you go back and you encounter the Stoics and the skeptics back at that time. And you can have, Paul Lee, go to Paul Lee's class, who teaches the ancient Greek philosophy, and you'll run into this. And what the Stoics did is the Stoics developed this entire metaphysical worldview of radical monism, that they believed that the material reality was all one, completely unified and internally self-referentially consistent and harmonious monad, as they referred to it as. And that therefore, if we as human beings who exist inside this monad can only discern the kind of bonding principles that bond the entire monad and all of its subcomponent elements into a consistent and harmonious whole, then we can voluntarily comport our conduct, both individually and collectively, in harmony with those principles. In that way, we're functioning in pursuit of the right and the just. That's a shorthand of it, but that's the bottom line theory. And the skeptics or on the other hand saying, that isn't so. You know, you don't know that. You don't know that. You can't prove that. You know, I don't believe that. And, you know, I'm as smart as you are. And so therefore I don't believe that. And let me punch holes in your story. And so that they've been engaged in this type of a debate for thousands of years, our human family. But I want to point out that in our approaching these alternative theories, you've got to understand that the reason that the people keep proposing these full-blown, internally self-referentially consistent explanations for the assassination is that they can't stand not knowing. They can't stand not knowing. The idea that the President of the United States, whom they viewed at that particular time, from 1960 to 1963, as being this new, young, vibrant, young president, the youngest president we'd ever had, was going to bring us all to the moon, was going to, reestablish our place of dominance in the world, etc., could possibly be just struck down in an instant, in a political parade somewhere, by some complete nutcase. You know, that just was so inconsistent with their idea of what he was about and the opportunities and the promises he held out. They just can't stand it. And so what they do is they lean toward these whole explanations. And so they move from one to another, trying to find out which one they believe in. And one of the things that I've discovered after 44 years of doing these kind of investigations, and as I say, I've done a bunch of them, all the way from the Karen Silkwood case to reviewing all the internal documents in the Pentagon Papers to explore what the nature of the Vietnam War was, and the Iran-Contra investigation, and others that I've done. What I've discovered is that you have to hold these full-scale theories pretty lightly. They're good for operational purposes and helping to guide you in your investigation, to look into the lacunae, or the holes in your theory, to figure out what's in there. But the fact of the matter is, when you start bumping into particular facts that are inconsistent with your worldview, what you have to do is you have to back up and insert this particular piece of information and readjust your entire theory so that you can stay on track with this thing. And that rather than for example, in almost all kind of more mundane legal cases where you have, for example, an automobile accident at an intersection, the judicial system attempts to lay blame on a particular party so that a big lawsuit can come down and they can end up, whether it's the automobile company that made the car, or that they were negligent in the braking system, or the people who built the red light at the intersection, somebody's going to have to be liable for this, and that they've got this entire theory of proximate causation, that somehow you spend all of your time figuring out who is proximately the most responsible for a particular thing that happened, a negative event that happened. Whereas, in fact, when you really look at those facts, what you discover in many cases is that the man who was driving one of the cars was coming into the intersection, and he could see that the light was turning yellow, but he decided that since he was late for his meeting that he was going to push that yellow light, and he was going to run through the yellow light, and he could make it through before it got to be red. And there's another person who's coming into the intersection from the other direction, and they dropped something on the floor or something, and they're coming through the intersection, and they lean down they only take their eyes off the road for a second to reach down to pick up what they're looking for, and they go on into the intersection. And you got a third car coming in from the other way, the four-way stop, who sees that the light is just getting set to turn green, and so they're just accelerating on in there to not lose their momentum, because they're probably driving a Prius. And that they want to just maintain their momentum going into the intersection, and so that they just kind of step on the gas, and all three of them come together in this big horrible collision and kill them all. And so their heirs all come rushing into court and try to lay the blame on one of the other ones, or in this particular case, the other two. together. They can be joint tortfeasors, but that I'm innocent, my heir. So that's how the legal system is functioning. And so this whole quest to try to figure out what happened in the Kennedy assassination is affected by those kind of attitudes within our legal system. And they're affected by this whole issue of worldviews. They're affected by this whole issue of which mode of analysis you're going to adopt, whether it's inductive or deductive. And so that what we're going to discover is that this Warren Commission report, which was so completely consistent with the FBI report and the Dallas Police Department report, has generated an affirmative narrative that because it was the one major official position of the government, has been subjected to just a storm of criticism. And it being the favorite, the number one position, just caused such a storm from both the left and the right that it kind of withered under the attack. And because now there are so many completely internally self-referentially consistent alternative theories of the crime, no one of which has actually gained the position of being the undisputed number one, no one of them has been subjected to the same degree of withering attack that the Warren Commission has been. And so that they still stand unthoroughly criticized. And so many people bump into one of these, and at first blush it comports with their worldview. And so they like it. And so they don't have time to really study it in great depth. So they'll kind of get a Cliff Notes version of this particular conspiracy theory. And it continues to feel good for them. And so they'll flog it around, at parties and in bull sessions when they're all talking about things like this. And they take a certain kind of pride in the fact that they're the defender of this particular theory. Okay, and that's sort of the condition of the field right now. So what I want us to do is I want us not to be guilty of that same kind of thinking. What I want us to do is to utilize the inductive method of analysis, understanding all of its shortcomings and its potential positive benefits, and start to try to determine what we can say here as we get ready to investigate these other 9 theories of the whole set of 10 theories that we're going to be investigating in this course. That we've already looked at the lone gunman theory, and now we're going to start next week right off looking at the House Select Committee on Assassinations. What I'm going to do in Thursday's lecture is I'm going to bring you from the point at the conclusion of the Warren Commission report and the early criticisms of it that we found with Rush to Judgment by Mark Lane and some of the other books that punched kind of big holes in the side of this theory, that between the publishing of those books around 1966, 2 years after the 1964 release of the Warren Commission, we're going to take a look at that period between 1966 all the way up to about 1975, actually 72, well, as far as a good stop right there. So we're looking at from 64 to 72, there's a little decade in there of events that take place that we're going to cover on Thursday, so that we can set up how it is that the House Select Committee on Assassinations ended up getting put into place, what all the kind of political pressures were on them, and all of the conditions on their investigation, etc. So what I want to do is, with those things in mind, both the value of developing a narrative and the challenges and dangers that are implicit in such a narrative and its potential for self-deception, and looking at the values of the inductive process, recognizing once again that it is almost inherently confined to never quite fully understanding the full truth, but at least they're in a position of being able to defend almost uniformly and effectively what few facts they're going to assert about this. So with that in mind, I turn our attention to this chronology that I pointed out at the beginning of our discussion today, that this 100-page narrative of information that is not entirely internally self-consistent. It puts pieces in place which appear to be, it's not like a movie, you know, 'cause like when you're in a movie and like if you're seeing this movie and they have this whole big scene going on, and all of a sudden the camera pans over and it shows, you know, this one faucet going drip, drip, drip. You say to yourself right away, that means something. They wouldn't have done that. If that, you know, every frame, they got to use every frame has got to be going somewhere. Yeah, well, that ain't true about reality. You know, there's no cameraman working in the back of your head. What there is that if you're an objective inquirer after the truth, what you're trying to do is you're trying to drop back and you're trying to maintain a certain place of focus, which takes in as much information as you can. But what you're going to find is that it's going to be inevitable that because of your particular worldview, somewhere along this octave of different worldviews, you're going to have a great inclination to dismiss very quickly certain information. This is going to come in that is so completely inconsistent with things that you like to hear or that you want to believe, that you just push that aside fairly quickly. And so you're going to have to try to retrain yourself here as we get ready to go into the exploration of these other 9 theories of the crime. I want you to be listening to the evidence that they have. And I want you to be able to evaluate the credibility of the different providers of the information. And I don't want you to dismiss the credibility of a particular witness simply because they're some kind of a right-wing pig. You know, I mean, because even pigs are right once in a while. And so that, you know, just because you have the chief of police, for example, of the Dallas Police Department say, yeah, we got the rifle right here, we know absolutely this is the rifle, you know, we got fingerprints on it, we got palm prints on it, everything. You don't just say, well, that's the chief of police of Dallas, you know, because it could be true, what he's saying. So you have to try to evaluate the sources of this information. And what we see is that there is footage, and this has become one of the most reliable sources of information, is the actual film footage and photographs of the immediate area in Dealey Plaza. And so that you'll see a whole lot of energy devoted to trying to look in at and get a closer look at tiny pieces of pictures. You're going to have all kinds of discussions about the gunpowder or the smoke that was seen on the grassy knoll, of smoke coming out of the end of a barrel of a gun. Okay, you're going to have all kinds of discussions about how blurry some of the pictures are that are purported to be a man standing behind a grassy knoll, standing on the bumper of a vehicle, leaning over the top of the vehicle with a rifle. And there's all kinds of people that will say, well, yeah, look, there it is. And other people will look at it and go, wow, it's a big kind of gobby blur there. And so that you're going to hear an awful lot of that. And so one of the things that has been true up until very recently is that there was inadequate technology available to really thoroughly and definitively investigate a lot of this visual data. And of course, then there's the arguments that you run into is that there's all kinds of witnesses who say, I had a picture of the people at the grassy knoll. I had a picture taken from the opposite side of the book depository that at the very moment that the president was shot, it had a full picture of the building of the Texas Book Depository, and the law enforcement people came and took it away from me, and I've never seen it since. And so that's a thing you have to take a look at that and say, wait a second now, who is it that said that? How credible are they? How had they conducted themselves in their life prior to that time? How have they conducted themselves subsequent to that time? How does that reflect upon their credibility? If you come to believe that that person did in fact have such a picture, and that you believe them when they say the law enforcement people came and took it, then you've got to evaluate, well, does that necessarily mean that the police have destroyed the picture, that they've hidden the picture on purpose because it reveals that there was nobody in the window, or that somebody else was in the window other than Oswald? And so but there comes a point in time, and I don't want to rush this point in time in this class. You have 10 whole weeks. Well, 5, you're 6 still, as there right now, to try to come to some form of resolution of what you believe about these things. And there is some value in having a time restraint upon yourself to be able to investigate things. And we will agree at the outset that your paper that you're going to be submitting at the end as your final paper is one that is stating your judgment as of this point in time in your particular career. You know, as I say, whether you're going to be a lawyer or a journalist or a scientist or an astronaut or whatever it is you're going to be, that this is the opinion that you came to, given all the opportunity of all the information that is in these things, all the information that is here, all of the information that's in all of those great big books that we put into the reading list at the end, whichever ones you've chosen to read. And so we understand that. You know, no one is going to keep you from being elected president of the United States because you may have made a certain judgment about the Kennedy assassination, you know, when you're 20 years old, that you no longer agree to. But I want you to come to that opinion. I want to get you to form an opinion about what it is that happened there. And I want you to be able to elucidate why you believe it.
In our final paper, are you going to want us to talk about the lone gunman theory and the criticisms we have and why that led us to believe something else, or are we mostly just going to stick to our theory?
No, if you can just, in a matter of a few sentences, you can say, you know, I've fully evaluated the lone gunman theory, and for reasons 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I find it unpersuasive. Or conversely, you can say, I've investigated the lone gunman theory, and I think it's credible for the following reasons, and let me tell you why I don't believe some of the other major theories that are inconsistent. So you can go either way you want to go on that. But it is true, the implicit point of your question is that should you address the lone gunman theory in any event, you should. Mainly, as I said, because it's considered to be the official government version of what happened, and you need to give it that much credit and attention, okay?
I had trouble with this paper because, I don't know, I felt like there was so much evidence and I didn't know, like, where are the strong points. Like, hard to tell where the strong, what are the strengths of the lone gunman theory.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we, like, go about picking what evidence we should include?
Well, is it specifically that you found it hard to find credible pieces of evidence? Well, I would think that you would then go back and you review, because it's up on the e-commons now, the videos of all of the lectures so far. That there is the class where we went through these kind of 24 things that were pointed out by Skeptic Magazine of what they believed to be true. And then we went through a whole series of others from the Warren Commission, and we went through the ones that were listed by Bugliosi. Specifically that particular 12 pages out of his book, where he went through the fact this issue around the ballistics on the magic bullet, the ballistics on the Mannlicher Kakana rifle, the handprints purportedly on the weapon, neutron activation tests that were done on the fragments. And if there's one particular piece of information, when you develop kind of a set of instincts for this after a while, that the bottom line is that the assertion that Bugliosi made and that the Warren Commission made, that the fragment, the bullet fragment that was taken from the brain of President Kennedy when subjected to the neutron activation test was shown to be definitively and beyond question from the same bullet that had a fragment of it that was found in the front seat of the limousine, on which both the FBI ballistics expert and the Illinois ballistics expert both subjected to a ballistics test and were able to say definitively that that fragment had been fired from Oswald's rifle. When you get to that spot, you know, if those things are true, then Lee Harvey Oswald shot and killed the president. Period. Okay? And so that there is a train of evidence that is dispositive on that. And so that when you get to that particular place, you have to say to yourself, now wait a second, if all of that's true, then this is over. Then we know that Lee Harvey Oswald killed him. But you can ask the question, say, well, even assuming that Lee Harvey Oswald shot him and killed him, does that mean he did so alone? And if he didn't do it alone, what difference does that make? And then, of course, the difference that makes is who was it that was working with him. It wasn't his wife. You know, and who else might have been doing it with him? And what are the implications of that? Okay, so those pieces of evidence right there are extraordinarily impactful upon one's determination as to whether or not Oswald killed the president. Because if you aren't willing to or don't feel inclined to do so, to take that additional step over and say, yeah, but look who did the ballistics test. You know, or tell me more about this guy, Dr. Gwynn, that did the neutron activation test. And did anybody talk to him later? You know, that if you're willing to step over and start to challenge that and ask those questions, and that's the problem. That's the problem with Bugliosi and with Posner, is that they never reveal to you. They never reveal to you the fact that Dr. Gwynn said, wait a second, the fragments that I ran the neutron activation tests on were not the fragments that were in the front seat that they run the ballistic test on and traced to Oswald's rifle. And but if you find that statement by him, you have to say, wait a second, who said he said that? Who said he said that? And when did he say that? And does he have a tape recording of him saying that? So what's the story here? You have to be able to do that, Craig.
It's worse. Okay, because and I'll bring the documentation for you on it.
Yeah.
But it's something that I just found out with the Warren Commission, where there were actually pieces of, there was a memo from the FBI that was basically allowing them to create evidence of their own. And they actually, memos going back and forth from the lawyers about creating phantom evidence or evidence that was placeholders were things they expected to find and put in there. And they'd say, okay, I've made this placeholder for evidence piece 512 or whatever it was. We're looking for something along these lines to go here.
Yeah.
And they had an okay ahead of time to fabricate evidence. So it's very bad.
Okay, so
Right,
so
and the other thing is this is a new one for me too. And I read it in Gaetan Fonzie's book, The Last Investigation.
Yeah.
Was that the Warren Commission report, the 888 pages, was released, and then 2 months later is when they released the 25 volumes, the 15 volumes of testimony, and the 10 volumes of evidence.
Yeah.
the discrepancies between the conclusions of the Warren Commission and that evidence, because I've gone through enough of it
That's
to
right.
understand it. I just didn't know that there was a 2-month gap.
Yes,
So it gave all the newspapers and everybody else
that's right.
this overwhelming impression that these guys.
They had a
have
whole
done
full
this
2
good
months to
work.
run wild
And
with
then when
the
finally
summaries.
the attorneys like Vincent Salandria, who was one of the
Yes.
primary ones, and the rest of them, actually went through it and compared testimony and evidence.
Salandra's
and
the
found
first guy
it
to do
didn't
it.
match at all with what they said in the
Yeah.
Warren report.
Yeah.
And this, it goes on till today, we can go through the Warren report and find things that still have not been followed up on at all.
So you have Greg weighing in on the suggestion that you step very wide of that information of them, because what he's saying is that very thing that I was talking about having a holistic theory, and actually opening up spaces where you hypothesize what might be in that space, which is consistent with the rest of your narrative. You have to make sure that you don't forget and leave that spot and leave your phantom piece of evidence in there and then mistake it for real. Okay, and that's what we're talking about here. Because this, if in fact, and I do encourage you that with regard to Dr. Gwynn, given the importance of Dr. Gwynn's reported findings as set forth by Bugliosi, that about him having run the neutron activation tests on those same fragments and found them to be the exact same composition that was in the president's brain, and that those fragments had ballistic tests run on them that traced them to Oswald's rifle. That his having left out any account of people having talked with Dr. Gwynn, and Dr. Gwynn having asserted that it isn't true, that I did not in fact run tests on those same fragments. They were just similar fragments, okay? And again, I say, but I encourage you to figure out who is it that said Dr. Gwynn later said that, and who are they, and what other things do they assert, and how credible are they, and can you find any kind of objective way of finding out whether or not Dr. Gwynn said that? Have you called up Dr. Gwynn? You know, and I'm telling you, don't be surprised. I mean, the fact of the matter is that a lot of these people, if a young student at UC Santa Cruz called them up and said, I'm in the midst of a course and I've got a question for you, you'll be surprised that they will answer you. They will, you know? And then you start to become famous, say. Then you go, hey, this is easier than I thought it was. All these people, actually sit by their telephone and take calls. But it's true. And so that you can then start to develop a sense of empowerment about how you can do these investigations. Because some of these people are still alive. Yesterday afternoon, get a call from this guy, I was mentioning it to you before class, who turns out to be the man who, in the photographs where Bobby Kennedy was shot and killed in Los Angeles on June 5th of 1968, that this particular man here, his name is Paul Schrade, S-C-H-R-A-D-E. Paul Schrade. It turns out that he's the other guy who got shot in the head at the same time, standing right next to Bobby. In fact, Bobby's last words were, "Is Paul okay?" Okay? And so I ended up having a conversation with a woman who's an old supporter of the Christic Institute, our Washington public interest law firm. She would call out of the blue and ask me what I was doing, and I mentioned I was teaching this course, and she said, hey, you got to talk to Paul, and she gives me Paul's phone number. And so I said, look, you call Paul and check out whether it's okay for me to call him. So she calls back and says, sure, he'd love to talk to you. And so I give him a call and spend 2 hours on the phone with him, having him discuss all the stuff and he knew Bobby and John absolutely personally very well all the time. He was perfectly happy to talk about it all the time. Okay, so what you want to do is that the quality of the research that you're willing to do for your final paper is entirely up to you. I mean, but if you really begin to get a feeling that you think this particular event in history is as important as I happen to think it is, and that a lot of other people happen to think it is, that if you really want to do some stuff of digging in a little bit more deeply, we're perfectly happy to do everything that we can possibly do, myself and our staff, to help you out. Okay? So you pick up the phone and call me at the 459-6136, and you call me, and I'll refer you to the place, or I'll say, look, come on over, I've got 2 books on it sitting up here on the shelf. We must have like, what, 60 books out of the 600 that have been written, at least. You know, and we've got them there, and so that you can come and sit right in our little library and read the things if you want. So I want you to utilize this particular event as a vehicle by means of which you can become inspired to actually do the kind of research and realize that there's some relationship between what you're doing in school and the outside world. You know, which gets to be a hard thing to keep in mind after you're about 3 years in. Yes, Greg.
Well, I was just gonna bring up some of these people, primary folks from back then, are just sitting there on Facebook, opening up pages and having open discussions with people about this stuff as best they can.
Yeah.
Organizing events.
And you can write to them. You can write. I'm getting set to get on a plane on Monday and fly into Washington. And I'm participating in a big presentation with Ralph Nader and Ramsey Clark. You know, and that there's a whole set of discussions going on in Washington D.C. about the 50th anniversary. John Judge has called me, wants me to go to Dallas to do the keynote in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd. Okay, but these are things that you know, you starting at this point in your career, if you start getting serious about anything, I'm not saying it just has to be about the Kennedy assassination, but get serious about anything and really start to get excited about something and really want to look into it. You know, by the time you get to be 39 like me, you know, you'll be able to pick up the phone and call people, and they'll be happy to talk to you too. But I'm trying to tell you, they'll be happy to talk to you now. They'll be happy to talk to you now. If you, or I guess be on Facebook with them, or whatever, their blog, okay? So that's the introductory discussion I wanted to have with you, so that you can hold in your mind at the same time as you're going through these the first 100 pages. And as I say, that you know, I think that if you sit down in between the games between Boston and St. Louis, and you kind of have this in front of you, and you're kind of going through these 100 pages of the chronology, you're going to start to get intrigued by this. You're going to start to say, wait a second, this is extraordinarily detailed stuff. I mean, how did they know that, for example, that Kennedy on the morning of November 22nd gets out of the shower at the hotel and takes off his St. Christopher medal and hangs it on the shower and ends up forgetting it and leaving it there? You know, and you start to say, well, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But on the other hand, if you're an adherent to the seventh paradigm worldview, the kind of theistic worldview, it's that kind of thing that if it were in a movie, you know, you see it go, and there it would be. That hand. And you're going to go, whoa. But if you're back here in the middle marginalist worldview, the fourth paradigm worldview of scientific logical positivism, you'll look at it and you'll go, what? So he didn't bring his medal. So what? You know? And it wouldn't have made any difference if he had the medal on. If it had come out, it wasn't on his throat, so it wouldn't have ricocheted the bullet someplace else. It wouldn't have hit it commonly if that was the same bullet. So you don't know. But what I'm saying is that this is an extraordinarily rich tapestry of information in that 100 pages, in that 387 to 487, basically, in your 1,000-page chronology. So I want you to get a look at it. I'm not assuming that most of you have seen it yet, because we put it up there a few days ago, and you haven't gotten a chance to look at it yet. But I do want you to take a look at it, and get to me your papers. Those of you who haven't gotten them, those of you who do have it, hand them in to Toby or Rob at the end of the day. Or if you want to, given the fact you got an extra couple days to finish them or go over them a little more snugly if you want to, since other folks are going to be handing them in on Thursday, then you can hand them all in on Thursday if you want, okay, and polish them up a little bit if you want. All right. So that's our first our time for my blathering at you. We're going to later today, even though we'll have our half-hour discussion here, and then I'm going to go over to the Inner Light Church, and we're going to have a discussion with the long-term learners, who are going to be able to ask their questions. They've been very good, very disciplined all the way up to this point in time, sitting back there going like that. That's why I've got them in back so you can't see them. They're all looking this way, or going like this. But anyway, so I'm going to go over and we're going to have a discussion over there this evening from 7:30 to about 9:30 or so. And then we'll be back on Thursday when we're going to have the discussion moving on in toward the select committee. Yes, Wes?
If us students are interested in what they might ask,
Yeah.
you show up,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
because I live over by there anyway.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're gonna go, quiet down, you students. You had your time. No, but yeah, everybody's welcome to come on over there. And there'll be free champagne and donuts and, like the longer term learners do when they're all together. I won't tell them what we do together when they're gone. Okay, so anyway, so that's where we are. So you probably got some questions about this. This is a little heady stuff about the deconstructionism and holism and postmodernism and internally self-referentially consistent narratives, etc. But it's important. It's important to just have these in your consciousness as you're wading into all of these other alternative theories. Okay, so go ahead. Let's have it here. Cody? Corey, I'm sorry.
You said that there was a French debate team that would take any affirmative statement.
College de Pataphysique.
Yeah, can you give an example of an affirmative statement that we might take for granted that they've done in the past?
Well, it's I don't know. I remember they told us all about this group when I was in college at Harvard College. It was in a drama course actually, and those of us who were in advanced drama, who've been in like 4 or more college level dramas, in case you hadn't guessed, they were trying to deal with the fact that if you're writing a play and you're going to be putting on a play, it helps if you are coming from a particular perspective and that you can lay out the play according to your worldview. And what they pointed out was that Jean-Paul Sartre, the very famous existentialist, was a grand centrale in the College de Pataphysique. And that the existentialists are a classic group that maintain that you can't really tell what's true. And that they assert, we're going to get some philosophy here from Chris, who's taking the course on skepticism in a second. But so what they will say is that, look, even though you can't tell what's true, it's too unbearable to be going through your life not at least pretending that you believe something is true. And so therefore, what you do is you come to some kind of a projection as to what you're going to assert to be true and use that as your organizing principle and conduct yourself accordingly. And that's the best that you can really do. That's existentialism in a thumbnail. And that's why the people who are existentialists, who want to get a full-scale bathing in this belief that you can't believe anything, ultimately, are part of that College de Pataphysique. But I'm sure you can find it on the internet if you can figure out how to spell it.
I was just gonna say that the skeptics actually believe that they can attack any matters of fact proposition, from like stating that the sun's gonna rise tomorrow to, I mean, anything that we really believe about our outside world, but not like, relations of ideas claims such as, like, a circle is 360 degrees around, you know, that's like it.
It's
Yeah.
self-definite. Well, but things like this is a table.
Yeah.
You know, you get into this first class of philosophy is about, this is a table. And they'll go, no, that's not a table. No, this is the construction of an idea of a table.
Isn't that a start?
No, it's actually Plato. Remember, Plato says that there's, in the realm of the forms, there's this pure idea of a chair, and that every chair is just an attempted manifestation of that pure idea of a chair. But in fact, it's not really a chair because it's just a whole bunch of atoms. If you look at it closely enough, it's just a whole bunch of atoms, and the fact of the matter is you can put a torch to it and it'll all fall apart into its individual atoms because you've just broken the bond that's there, and so that it may be temporarily a chair, or it may have the appearance of being a chair. And the problem with those philosophy courses, of course, is that unless there is some purpose behind the teacher in philosophy, and you, the student of philosophy, it gets terribly boring. You know, these types of abstract discussions that they engage in. And Danny Paul, my older son, is at the University of Chicago now doing his graduate work in political theory. And that he's in the process right now of attempting to deal with John Rawls. John Rawls was the chairman of the Department of Philosophy at Harvard University. And he has been trying to articulate why it is that it's justified to believe that all people are equal in value, and that they're all each person is entitled to the maximum possible degree of freedom. And so you start from that particular point and you say, whoa, that's a kind of strange place to start with, but it's important for the whole theory of democracy. I mean, the whole idea that, you know, you're entitled to have a vote that is equal to one of the Koch brothers. Well, probably not, that's not a good choice. Because they buy millions of votes. But the bottom line is that if you have a purpose, and that's why I want this course to be important for you. I want you to see this as people who are highly motivated by purpose have gathered around this issue over the years and have spent their entire lives attempting to deal with this event because it's so important to them and their sense of meaning and their worldview and what the import of this is. And some of them come out fairly shallow. Bob Schieffer from NBC wrote a thing in one of the magazines that somebody tore out and gave to me the other day, and it's called the 50th anniversary of JFK, the day that changed America. You know, but you go down into it, and what his basic premise is that it was the day when more people shifted away from getting their news from print media to television. And from that point onward, everybody, a majority of people, an ever-increasing majority of people got their news from the television instead of from the print media. And I go, well, that's of some value. You know, I mean, that's an important sociological fact. There's probably more cosmic things that can be learned from the event. But on the other hand, maybe not. If you're part of the college of Pataphysique, right? Yes, Wes.
So I've been reading some of the testimonials from like Bill Whaley and a few other people. I can't remember. And in the testimonies, a lot of them say that they saw the picture of Oswald in the morning paper before they went to their to the lineup to identify Oswald.
Yeah.
and then they'll like rescind that, like after there's like a off-the-record discussion, essentially.
Yep.
Why would the Warren Commission even print something like this if they're gonna, if this is a fabrication, why would they go through the trouble of like printing all this stuff that makes them look like complete hypocrites?
Yeah.
Why not just leave it out?
The answer to that is that people are far less competent than you think. Really true. People are far more incompetent than you think they are. You know, and what they do is they put a whole lot of effort into writing up this big summary and making sure that it was all completely internally and self-referentially consistent, and it went right to the point they were trying to make. And then everybody kept saying, yeah, but where's all the testimony and stuff that you guys took? And they went, okay, and they spent 2 months putting it all together in these 5 volumes, and they put it out there. And they said, well, look, you know, less than 1/10 of 1,000th of 1% of anybody's going to read that shit. That's what they said. Probably said it in Latin, but then they said that. They said that, and the fact is, it's true. You know, the number of people that have read those volumes is probably less than that. Okay, but the fact is that those who have taken the time to read it will say, wait a second, what about Bill Whaley's testimony about the fact that he saw the thing in the paper and all that? And then the question is like, well, who are they saying that to? Because the commission is all done.
He said, the taxi, Bill Whaley said, I just said that because that's what they said I said.
Yes. Yeah.
That was quoted in the Warren Commission.
Yeah, and so your question is, why in the world would the Warren Commission have actually said that he said that?
Yeah.
You know, and as I say, it's because they had lots of pressure on them. They had time restrictions on them. They had to get those volumes out. People were saying, look, come on now. You know, you got the summary out here, and everybody's, you know, drinking the Kool-Aid.
So it was a matter of them lacking somebody to go over it before they put it out?
Yes.
That simple?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, they had a limited number of people who get up every morning, put their pants on one leg at a time, go over to the office and do the work, and they didn't have enough time to go through the thing and take all those things out. And, you know, and because it would have been much harder there would be much fewer people than that percentage that I cited that have actually read all the 5 volumes. There would be much fewer of them that go looking for what they took out. You know, say, where are you going to find it anyhow? You know, and that's, if they had done their job, what they viewed to be their job, they would have taken that out. And then the person would have spent a lot of time trying to figure out where that went to. Okay, and that's what you discover is going on in that world. You know, and that they don't have adequate time to do things. I had a case where we represented the families of the 5 kids who've been shot down, gunned down, and killed down by the Ku Klux Klan, the American Nazi Party, down in Greensboro, North Carolina, back in '79. And you know, we sued the police department, we sued the Klan and the Nazi Party, and we sued the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division of the Treasury, we sued the FBI, and we took depositions, and I took discovery, and the ATF, you know, we just kept pouring it to them with the discovery demands and getting volunteers to read through whatever it is they were sending back to us, right? And they ended up sending us a whole handwritten account by Bernard Butkovich, who was the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division undercover agent that they sent in from Cleveland, Ohio to infiltrate the Nazis, in which he acknowledged that he was in the meetings where they decided they were going to come and kill these kids. You know, and that he was waiting to see if they were going to go get automatic weapons. It would have been a violation of the ATF regs. And when they didn't, he just didn't tell anybody. And that he actually went down to the scene where they were killed and watched them all get killed. And turned around and came back and went back to his apartment.
What was this guy's name?
Bernard Butkovich, his name was. And so one would say to yourselves, why the hell would the ATF give us that document? You know, and in fact, when I whipped it out at him in his deposition and laid it in front of him and started interrogating him on it, Joe Schmidt, whatever his name was, from the Justice Department, leaped out of his chair and started ranting about how we had people infiltrating the Justice Department and stealing internal documents. And he screamed and hollered and went to Bob Marriage, who was the judge on the case, And Judge Marriage comes into the deposition and asks me to step out with him. I go into his chambers and he said, Dan, he said, look, where did you get that document? And I said, the stupid shits gave it to me. And he and I laughed. He said, you can't really use that. Because that was just a mistake giving that to me. I was like, excuse me? You know? At which point he then said to me, look, I can believe that the Klan and the Nazi Party did this. And I can even believe that the Greensboro police could have done this. But not my government. That's what he said to me. Sitting right there, right in front of me. That's worldview stuff. That's worldview stuff. It can't be true, even though I'm looking right at it. You know? And then when we found out that Bukovich's commander, his direct superior in the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division, a guy named Dukes, was a member of the Phoenix program, which was an assassination program, actually in Southeast Asia, working for the Central Intelligence Agency. And you say, whoa, what does that mean? You know? Well, what it meant to the kids who were in the Workers' Viewpoint organization who've been killed was that that confirmed that they were the vanguard of the working class in the world, and that they'd been targeted for intentional assassination by the United States government. Which was another worldview, you know? Turns out same worldview. Dialectical confrontation with good guys and bad guys in the
What
world.
was the CIA connection? I'm sorry.
He was the guy who was the supervisor for Bernard Butkovich in the Cleveland office out of the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division of Treasury, was a former CIA member of the Phoenix program, which is an assassination program in Southeast Asia. Yeah? And so that they went off on a big, twit, insisting that they were going to put in the theory of the case that they were the vanguard of the working class and they'd been targeted by an intentional assassination program that went all the way into the CIA. And I kept saying to them, look, you can't do that, because I mean I don't even believe that's true.
Well, what
That's one of
happened
those
with
pieces.
Butkovich?
Pardon?
What happened with Butkovich?
He was they insisted upon putting in the theory that this was an intentional assassination by the ATF and them, and the jury wasn't going to buy it. So the jury gave them $1 million, but only against the Klan and the Nazis and the Greensboro Police Department and the city of Greensboro. Basically, just like the judge had in mind. That's all he could bear. And so that was all he would let us get in. He wouldn't let us put in the information. So that I told him, you are going to get the information and it's going to confirm your theory. So, so they said, so what? We're supposed to kind of reduce our theory to what the judge wants us to say? So, they could have gotten probably 10 times more money, but they didn't care about the money. They wanted to get a jury determination that they were the vanguard of the working class. So you'll encounter cases like that in your career after you go to law school. And you'll see that these things come up over and over and over again. These kind of general concepts that we're talking about here, I want them to be as operational as we can in the context of a very concrete case like this with the Kennedy assassination, which has such emotional power to it. Because I want you to understand that these concepts are important and they become operational for you. And whether you're a journalist or a lawyer or a historian or whatever it is you're going to be. Okay? That was a long answer to the one question. So I'm sorry for holding for it. Okay? What's next, you guys?
That's a showstopper.
I don't want to have to start marking people down for lack of participation. There's a blank sheet. I've not put anything on yet on that. So I'm obviously you have more questions for me. Don't be shy now. I'll be forced to ask from a question. There we go.
So earlier you were pointing out the dangers of an affirmative thesis, and then also the dangers of deconstructionism, which are essentially opposite ways of looking at something.
Sure.
But the goal of this class seems to be to construct an affirmative thesis. So where do we find that balance?
That's right. It's what I want you to do is I want you to be aware of the strengths and utilitarian aspects of an affirmative thesis, but be constantly cognizant of what the potential dangers are. And to see what the value of deconstructionism is, so that you can kind of bring those to bear to attack certain major pillars of your affirmative theory and see how well it holds up. You know, and the balance will tend to establish itself with you doing it. And inevitably, it'll have a lot to do with your own more or less unconscious positions as to your worldview. You know, whether or not you're more inclined to an inductive line of analysis or a deductive line of analysis. And you'll begin to start to discover that these aspects of how you go about doing things. And it may not become completely self-conscious. You know, it might not be that you're going to have a little appendix on your paper by saying, I have found that I have this particular attitude toward inductiveness and deductive. I don't have to have all that stuff. But that was the point of that story that I got lost on the other day with that class, that Sakura 120 class that we had. Because what I discovered is that they were doing is they were constructing a mobile of all of us in the whole course on these three axes of the upward and downward and forward and backward and positive and negative. They were locating every single student in the class at a particular matrix on that mobile. And that they believe that every single group, such as our 30 students here, and that's why, again, I want to have you guys be discussing things among yourselves and with us without the long-term learners directly involved in it, because I want you to be able to develop a sense of camaraderie and solidarity among yourselves as a generation, trying to work together on thinking what you think of this particular event. So we can have some kind of a collective sense at the end of the course as to how this thing worked and how well you've come to pay attention to this important issue.
Maybe I'm thinking too much about it, but when you're talking about using an inductive line of reasoning, and that's probably like or from what I got out of it, you think that's a better route to take. Isn't it impossible then to come to like a sound conclusion of like what actually happened if we're using inductive reasoning?
As I said, it's an intrinsic aspect of inductive reasoning that you're never quite certain about what the reality is. But what it does from an existential point of view is what it does is if you can figure out that there are a number of specific if you can figure that there's a number of specific facts that you're able to come to very solid conclusions that you believe are true. And make no mistake about it, ultimately all that you can do is determine whether you believe it. Okay? If you believe it and you have this many pieces and you see that there is this relationship among the pieces of information that you believe, okay, what you try to do is figure out whether or not this generates any particular, I use that term, algorithm. Are you discerning any kind of pattern in the facts as you kind of put them together, as you kind of pop them onto your page, that you're going to discover that there's some kind of a relationship among those facts, some kind of pattern that seems to be rising up out of those facts that actually points in a direction, a specific direction. Then what you can do is this thing that we were talking about is you can say, well, what are the particular pieces that would naturally appear along this algorithm if your projection is accurate? And then when you've got to go reading through a whole bunch of stuff and all of a sudden, bang, there's one of those things, or you find somebody who has attested to that having been true, then what you can do is you can put that into your equation. So that's the value that this has. And so that there's going to be inevitably what I'm calling upon you to do is inevitably to attempt to generate some sort of algorithm from the facts that you genuinely believe to be true, and project it out into a direction toward a particular holistic theory of what it is that happened here. And then, to the extent to which you have the time and the inclination to do so, look through the rest of the referenced documentation and stuff and other things to see if you can find pieces of information that confirm your algorithm. Okay? And that the more pieces that you find that fit into your algorithm, the more certain you can be of it, while acknowledging that you can't be absolutely certain because you weren't there. You know, but we all understand that to be true. Okay, so that's the value that this has. Okay?
Okay, so say we have all the pieces of information like that you showed us on the or whatever.
Yeah.
How far into the proof do we write in our paper, like, this person said this, and this person heard them saying it, and this person this and this? Like, how far do we go into, like, we just put the evidence out there and, like, go, like, based on where we found the information, or how?
What you could do is this. You could say that here are pieces 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That in all of my readings, I came to these things, I became certain that these were true. And they generated the following principle to me. They appeared to generate the following principle. And so I projected out this principle toward a potential thesis of this thing. And then I went looking to see if there were other information that was confirming this particular thesis. And what I've done is I found the following pieces: 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And you put them in there. And you say that this tended to confirm what I was thinking. And if in fact there's a piece of information, you say, there is this problem, however. There is this other piece of information that appears to be entirely credible. And it's not consistent with my theory. You know, but that I'm just telling you that's the fact, but I still believe this is true. Okay? So you can have that kind of methodology for putting your paper together. It's a way of doing it. Just one way of doing it. But it would work. Okay? How are we doing? Oh, gee, we're out of time.